for promoting their brands.
Hi there, Noel. Please welcome. You may start now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. It is my honor and pleasure to be here. We have such an amazing audience here, so I hope you will find at least something that's interesting inside of this presentation. I put it together just for you, so I hope you will enjoy it. One of the things that I always like to do is just talk a little bit, that introduction was amazing, but it was very professional. So it was all of my professional accomplishments. So I always like to just remind you that I actually am a person and I have a family, and they are really the driving force, especially now in this time, for a lot of the work that I have done in my career, as well as the work that I continue to do. So you can see here, I have 4 children. This is actually the first day at NPR. I was such a fan. I was really excited to be there. I went on a tour of the NPR National Public Radio studios and took a selfie like all of the rest. And it was my honor to do that. The mission of the company was so pure. It was all about, really making sure that we created a more informed America. And I felt like my role in artificial intelligence and voice experiences would really do that. I'm sorry? Can you see it? Are you good? Oh, there we are. All right, awesome. So thank you. I don't know why that happened, but anyway, but I appreciate it. So now you can see my 4 kids and you can see me at NPR. And specifically, the 2 things that I'm going to talk to you about today is, one, how do we, we're in this time of crisis, what can we do to help? I often watch, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn all the time, and people are in this place where they want to help and they don't know exactly how. And so I'm going to talk about how artificial intelligence, and more specifically voice interfaces, can be used by anyone to build an experience that might be helpful for all sorts of people, specifically those with maybe some accessibility issues. So you'll see here in the middle of the screen, my son, Max, he's 15 years old, my firstborn. He has Down syndrome. And so the world was hard for him to navigate with a typical mouse and a keyboard or a computer. So having the ability to talk, which he's very talkative, having the ability to navigate the world with his voice opened things up for him. My dad, the same way. He's 72, which is actually pretty young, but unfortunately, he got hit by a car as he was walking across the street in Seattle. And in that moment, he suffered this brain injury, and now he really can't use computers and phones the way he used to. And voice, again, really opened the world. So that is my motivation for sharing this information with you. But I also have another motivation. One of the things I've done over the past few years, just very quickly, is become an advocate, not only for accessibility in tech. In other words, we need to create software that's accessible to everyone, that anyone who, even if I don't have a mouse or a button or screen, I can execute and communicate to the world. But also leadership and mentorship of people of diverse backgrounds and diverse cultures coming together to help build artificial intelligence. And so these awards just kind of represent my time in that space, but I'll encourage you at the end, I'll show you a LinkedIn link that you can click on. I'd love to connect with all of you. So you could just connect with me, see more about my background, but more importantly, maybe think about things that we could collaborate on together. Now this quote, I don't like reading quotes on like virtual things, but it's important. And the reason it's important is every CEO I've worked for, you heard that really long list of companies, right? IBM and Red Hat and VMware and Amazon and Microsoft. All of the CEOs have really focused on this one concept. And that concept is really kind of summed up very nicely in this quote. So I wanted to just share that quote with you. So what is success? That's the name of the quote.
Sorry, I wasn't able to share that for you.
I love voice-activated technology. I'll be talking about that in just one moment. So to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child or a garden patch or a redeemed social condition. To know that just one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. All the CEOs I've worked for has mentioned this quote, had like Jeff Bezos had it on his fridge for a while. All of these leaders said, like, it's not about the tech, it's about what we will do with it, how we will change the world with it. And I think it's very comforting to me to know that the leaders of these technical companies are thinking about that. Yes, they are thinking about revenue too, but they are thinking about how do we change the world. So I'm going to share with you, as a result of my career, what I've uncovered as mechanisms, especially now in this time, that we can use to make our own impact. So we have more power than ever, more technology, more APIs, more interfaces than we've ever had before. But here is the challenge with that. And some of you may know this quote. With great power comes, hopefully you got there, great responsibility. One of my favorite characters, Uncle Ben, Spider-Man's uncle, reminded him as he gained all this power and strength that he has a responsibility to do something with that power. And so I encourage you to think about that as well. Oftentimes we build things and we do want to solve a specific problem or help save someone's, create a better life experience for someone, but we have an ethical responsibility to think beyond that, right? To think what happens with this data? What happens with this data set? What happens with the team I'm building? Let's think longer term about the ethical implications of the technology that we're building. It doesn't mean we need to stop building. We don't even really need to slow down. We just need to make sure that that ethical conversation is happening and that we're all educated enough to have a healthy, diverse conversation about it. So now that you know, right, we've got this immense power, I want to talk to you a little bit more about what exactly that power is. And really, we call it artificial intelligence. It's kind of this big umbrella term that represents a bunch of technology. I'm going to just talk about some very specific parts of this AI umbrella. But I encourage you, if this is interesting to you, to really look into all the different aspects of AI. I'll show you a screen that gives you a nice kind of view of it, but there's so many options and I have such little time. I'm going to try and hit as much as I can, but I encourage you, just dive deep, be curious, and find out more. So we can change the world. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that everyone knew listening to this was that there were open data sets available. Now, I can't show you all of them, but I do want to show you a few and some of the ones that I have used to build some applications that I'm pretty proud of. So here is a list. Now I know, I'm kind of obliged as a presenter to present a bunch of words, at least on one screen that you can't read or you don't have maybe time to read. So I actually, at the end of this, you'll see there's a link to the slides. So you'll be able to get this, no problem. It's available on slideshare.net. Has the name of our event and the name of this session, so you can find it very easily. But these are just some of the data sets, a very few. There are hundreds of them, but some of them that I thought might be interesting to think about. Now, what are open data sets? One of the things that I think is important for you to understand is that machine learning, artificial intelligence, the ability to let computers do things is only really possible when you're able to train a computer on the types of decisions you want it to make, right? You're literally going to say, I want you to tell the difference between a dog and a cat. And the only way it knows that is you tell it 100 or 1,000,000 pictures of what a dog looks like. So when it looks at a cat, it clearly, because it's got 1,000,000 experiences with what a dog looks like, clearly goes, well, that's not a dog. And so it can make those decisions easier due to this training data. And that's really what this is. Many of the problems that you have or that you might experience through a loved one or that you might see in the world, you could actually use data that's openly available to start solving those problems. So I mentioned here, there's a COVID open data set. Of course, I have to mention that we're in this time. So those who are looking at this, a year from now will be like, oh my gosh, remember that, hopefully. There's also the WHO, right? The World Health Organization that has all of this data as well. but those are very specific data set providers. I also wanted to give you a couple generic providers. So Google and Alexa and Amazon Web Services have both collected a whole bunch of data sets from their customers that were willing to share that data and have made them publicly available. So those links are provided here. And then my personal favorite is to remind you that you don't actually have to solve like world hunger or disease to make the world a better place. That's why I love that quote that we started with, right? Just make one life easier. And that one life could be the life of someone who is in, an elder care home, or a child who's in an orphanage, or like, how could I make the world better for them? And maybe it's by educating the world that they have needs. And maybe one way you might do that is by creating a blog and having that on Alexa and getting it into 60 million homes. There are so many opportunities. So I wanted to talk to you about one thing that I did that I felt made the world a little bit of a better place. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is a museum in New York City, has an open data set. There are 400,000 images in this data set. And what I wanted to do is I wanted my son, who has Down syndrome, to be able to ask for art, look at art. I wanted myself as a parent to be able to curate art for him and then let him use his voice to kind of find out more about it. Who did it? Where were they from? What other art is like this? What other art did they do? And use his voice to navigate that experience, because he couldn't really easily, right, go in and drop down a menu or navigate that on a web page. And this gave me the opportunity to do that. So we ended up creating an Alexa skill to do that work. And I'll talk to you about how we did that, both sides. One from the, I know no code and have no idea how to build an Alexa skill or anything technical at that level. And then the other side, for those of you who are more technical, if you want to dive into kind of how to build an Alexa skill from a programmatic perspective. Now, remember earlier I mentioned, we've got this concept of AI, and there are so many use cases that AI can solve. AI is this huge umbrella. So I consider artificial intelligence in kind of these boxes. This is created by Microsoft based on their cognitive services platform. And I mention this to you because it's what we call democratized AI. Amazon has some of these, Google has some of these. I find that Microsoft clearly has the biggest collection of them. And it's taking advantage of the technology that a company like Microsoft would build, but then making it available via an API for someone like me, a Java developer or a JavaScript developer or a Python developer. Now I can access those machine learning algorithms with just the call to a single function. I don't have to build the model. I don't have to be a machine learning expert, and I don't have to be a data scientist. Sometimes I want to be, but I don't need, that's not a barrier to being able to improve like experiences through my technology that I build. So I wanted to just show this to you. You'll see there's a bunch of vision ones around like computer vision and analyzing text and images and being able to, in language, being able to analyze the text to identify sentiment analysis or moderate text and find out like who's saying bad things, who's saying good things. How do we make sure we create a safe space for everyone? Speech, obviously, I came from Alexa. That was my first introduction to AI. So I'm very keen on the speech services. Speech to text, text to speech. There's right now in private beta, there is the ability to create a custom voice font, like for myself. So if I built a bot on my own website, I could actually build a bot that sounds just like me. I know it sounds interesting, but so many different options, right? So many different places to start thinking about how can I use AI to change the world? So now you've got these models that are available to you. You don't have to be a data scientist to use them, and you've got this data. So you've got two very critical pieces to being able to solve some very real problems. Now, I wanted to make sure that you also had the ability, one of the other objectives I had in this session was like, let's take one demographic that's critically hit by this specific crisis that we're in right now, which are educators. I have 4 children, as you now have seen. So I have very interesting and diverse education needs across all of them, especially one with special needs. So I really got passionate about how can I use the technology and the knowledge that I have to build, technology for them. And so I thought it would be nice to share with all of you, if you know a teacher, if you are a teacher, this is something that anybody can do. And I'm going to give you some tools that allow you to build applications for the classroom without any coding experience as well. But let's start first with what we should build. So here you'll see kind of a big diagram, but in this diagram, the most important thing I want you to take away from it is this concept of a bot intelligence layer. So imagine if you're in your car, right? And you're talking to, I don't know, CarPlay, Siri, one of the voice, assistants. Then you get to your office and you're talking to your PC, your laptop has voice built in today. Then you go home and you're in your kitchen and you're talking to Alexa. What I would love to see happen is I don't have to, as a developer, build a platform for each of those things, right? I don't have to build my banking app for Google, build my banking app for Bixby, build it for Alexa. I build it once and I can just distribute it to all of these channels. And that's what the bot service provides. And it's a service of Azure on Microsoft, but it provides this one bot to rule them all, so to speak, right? One layer of code that allows us to do all the work, right? Whether it's scheduling, you'll notice all of the business processes on the back end, right? Maybe it's an enterprise data store that gives me sales data. Maybe it's information about my employees. Maybe, who knows what it is? But as I've got my little earpiece in during the day, I can just start talking, and that bot service layer will talk to all of those bots on my behalf. And then my channels are indifferent, right? I could come in on Slack, I could come in on Alexa, I could come in on Google, I could change between them. And because they're all hitting that same layer of functionality, like they all get the same data, which means if I start a conversation on Google, I could finish it or even continue it on Alexa. It's not an experience we have today, but I don't think we're very far. And I do think that it's up to us, the technologists, the engineers, to really push this envelope. The tech is there. Like I've seen it, I've built it, it's there. We just now need to educate the world, educate the developers on how to build experiences like this that reduce the friction for users as they start, right, trying to start their day by checking their calendar and then moving calendar items around and then, being able to go and pick up their dry cleaning and have this voice activated, contextually aware assistant throughout the day. And then it doesn't matter looking at those channels, what channel you're on to do it. Now, the last thing I wanted to cover with you is the ability for voice enablement in general, all across the world. Now, I didn't get into we only have a few minutes, but I didn't get into the details of how do you build a bot. I have tons of content on that already. But I'm also, like I said, we'll talk about how you can connect with me and we can work together on these things. There's lots of resources available for you to do the task. I think it's really important to understand why you might do that. So voice enabling the world is really about two options, right? What happens if you're super technical and you want to dive right into the code and start building a skill from scratch? And then also, what happens if you're not that technical, but you have real content, like content the world needs? Let's say you're a blogger or a video, a YouTube creator, or let's say you have a podcast. Imagine what would happen if you just opened the doors for you to be able to put that podcast on Alexa without having to know any code or having to know anything about how to deploy a skill to Alexa to do that. So that's what I want to share with you here. Now, it's important to understand kind of the concept of building an Alexa skill. I have a very specific way I've done it. I've built over 100 skills for Alexa. 40 of them are on the platform. Some of them do very, very well. But I believe heavily in this crawl, walk, run concept. Crawling meaning you build one remarkable function. You don't boil the ocean. You don't try to do a ton of things. You do one thing. And it's not the minimum thing you could do. It's the most awesome thing you could do. And the way that I define awesomeness is I go to what users are doing already with me on my website. I go to what maybe they're doing on my mobile app. And I look for the thing that's hardest for them to do through that interface that they do the most often. And what I end up finding is that key thing that is a cross section between what they want to do and how hard it is for them to do it, voice enabling that becomes a very successful way to meet their needs. So that's my crawl, right? I build one thing. And then naturally, right, where most of us probably are familiar with the concept of agile and iteration and CI/CD or continuous integration and continuous improvement you know what I mean? Like the ability for us to constantly deploy and really build in small pieces. Walk is that concept of taking little things and building on top of those, creating bigger features and bigger functions, and bringing our users along with us and listening to them. One of the things I loved about working at Amazon Alexa and Amazon in general was that users drove 95% of the roadmap. That meant that if a user said something, we prioritized how we were going to fix that problem. And I thought that that was an incredible way to drive product development. And I was surprised as I moved around to find that not everybody does it that way. So finally, with Run, you know, now you've got maybe 100,000 users, or like my skills, across all my skills, I have 1 million unique users. What do I do now? How do I increase their, you know, their accessibility of that platform? So I always talk about, now you go multimodal. You start thinking about screens and the ability not only to use your voice, but use it in conjunction with things like a browser or a Fire TV, or being able to just use the displays that come with devices today. So, but don't do that work, right, when you're just starting to crawl and just starting to get a user base to use voice. Start with that minimum remarkable product. For future reference, when you go through, or if you choose to go through this deck again, I just put an example skill in here so you could take a look at it. Awesome. So as we go through, the last thing I wanted to share with you was like this code, low code or no code versus developer environment. And these are 2 links you can take a look at. If you go over to Alexa Blueprints, I will share with you that it has over 50 no-code blueprints for some of the most popular skills. The thing that is missing is the content. And that's where you come in. If you're a content creator, or if you are a publisher and you know content creators, you can get that content into the world and on 60 million or 100 million devices worldwide with a few clicks of a button. So this is really important. If you want to get a skill into market, you could do this today. You could push it to certification by the end of today if you choose to, by just going out to the Blueprint site. And it actually is a hyperlink, and I'm sure it's correct, but it's blueprints.amazon.com. So sorry about that. And then if you're a developer, it's developer.amazon.com. So just 2 sites, 2 different sides of the fence. It should serve everyone who's listening, right? If you are a coder, go to the developer console, learn the APIs, and build a meaningful experience, starting with a minimum remarkable product. And then if you're not a coder, go to Blueprints. You can build inspirational quote skills. You can build a blog skill that just reads your blog every day. There's so many options. Like I said, over 50 blueprints. So take a look at either one of those. And so as we wrap up, it has been my sincere pleasure to share this kind of whirlwind tour of artificial intelligence in this world. I know I was getting to a point where I was kind of complaining about like, oh, this is terrible. And I'm locked in my house with 4 children and my dad. And it came to me like, oh my gosh, I should do something with this. I should use my energy for good. And these are the things that I've looked at in order to do that. So this is me on Twitter. Please feel free to follow me. I post resources and links and just my daily craziness on there all the time. You're also more than welcome to follow me on LinkedIn. And though you can't see it from here, I will make sure that the team gets the SlideShare link. But you can also just go to slideshare.net and do a search for this session, and it should pop right up, or for my name, and it'll pop right up as well. So it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it.